I was looking at this library and I was thinking that one of the last great holdouts against commodification is surely libraries. And I know that Kevin Callanan, the General Secretary of Force in my own unit here in Ireland, the struggle that workers in libraries have at the moment against the far right, who are attacking the ability to give out and have books that people will find helpful and meaningful. So I think that there will be a need for a book some 5-6 years from now is, did we win that fight and how did we win that fight and what role was played by all of us in that. Ronald, I want to congratulate you and all the authors for 2 reasons in particular. I hardly ever pick up a book that I recognise trade unions in. And this book I really did. I recognised us. I saw that you were recognising that trade unions are active agents of change. And that is very, very well recorded, and I want to thank all of you. And indeed, when I was coming here, Jan William, the General Secretary of EFSIP, said to be sure and thank all of you. I know he's already done that already, but he said to be sure and thank all of you again. The second reason to congratulate you is I hardly ever pick up a book that says, and so what? And what should we do about it? And it's very clear, as Kamala Harris would say, what the big learning for me from this was, when we fight, we win. Because you can look down the change that was there, that we were successful in securing. You can plot a direct line between active demonstration on the street, the preparation of legal arguments, the making of those legal arguments, the preparation of law, the campaigning to get it, and the change. But what I thought I'd do is exactly as to start with my own experience during the Troika years. If I can do that in the spirit of scholarly citizenship rather than as Esther Lynch, the General Secretary of the ETUC. So I'm not speaking on behalf of the ICTU, but we just talk a bit about my own experience at that time. We had for sure that meeting, I remember it very well, Dublin Castle, because it was shock and awe. The way in which the fundamental rights of workers were discussed, human rights were discussed, but also how minimum wages were trivialized. And then in the recommendations that came, and they were an offer you couldn't refuse, you said it so much more eloquently, but it was an offer you couldn't refuse if you wanted access to the programme of assistance. The reform package had to be put in place. And that reform package said that minimum wages had to be reduced by €1 an hour. The very people who did benefit from the Celtic Tiger had to be the first people to pay. Then it was the low-paid workers with their sector agreements in hospitality. They couldn't have their 50 cents an hour extra overtime. And then after that was achieved, then they went for public servants. Then they said, well, if the minimum wage people have to take the cut, so could all of you on your pensions and everything else. So that really had such a huge impact on me that when I was elected to Confederate Secretary at the ETUC, I said we need to think about laws that we can use as a shield to protect us from that ever happening anywhere in Europe ever again. And that was why the Minimum Wage Directive was so important. Because the Minimum Wage Directive says 2 things. It says minimum wages must be adequate, and member states must ensure that they're adequate. It has a threshold of decency of 50% of the average, 60% of the median. But it also says that that can't be your only matrix. You have to look to see can people really afford to live on life with dignity. Now what that will mean is, the next time the Troikers show up somewhere, because they're going to show up somewhere, member state will be able to say, no, you can't make me do that, because then I'll be breaking the minimum wage directive. You will be forcing me to put my minimum wage below that level which is adequate. I'm not saying they will do that, but they can do that. So it will be using law to reinforce, to act as a shield, so that the first people in the line won't be those on minimum wage. Then the second thing that was done at that time was to really undermine. Now, there was a homegrown attack on sector agreements, but also the Troika were very, very active in that, because I remember the meetings, I remember all the letters. And so what the Minimum Wage Directive also says is that collective bargaining, the structure supporting collective bargaining, must be such that in every member state you're getting coverage levels of around 80%. Now, the only way you can get to 80% is to have collective agreements that are at sector level collective agreements. Doing it company by company, unit by, you have workplace by workplace. It's just going to take too long. There really needs to be a focus on having sector level collective agreements. And again, we will be able to protect from attack by the Troika using that minimum wage directive. No, I'm not naive. We'll need strong unions. We'll need to put up the struggle and we need to put up the fight, whether it's in the workplace or on the street. And again, really want to congratulate you on that list because it was a super encouraging list of demonstrations. There's just then 2 more points because I know we're going to have a discussion. So we're not stopping there. So we have other plans which will directly impact. We're using labour law to directly impact not only on the rights of workers, because that's first and foremost, but also in this commodification, decommodification axis, which is a very, very helpful way to think about what's happening. One of the ways in which you can persuade the general population to agree to a commodification is that you provide public services without enough workers, without enough money, and in a way which really people say, well, why would we want to defend that? So one of the things we're looking at is the new directive on psychosocial risks. And what we're talking about within that directive is an idea, I'm not sure this is the right term, but the term we're using is ethical stress. And what I'm thinking in this circumstance is of a teacher who can't spend the time with the struggling student, the nurse who can't spend the time with the patient, the care assistant who isn't able to spend the time with the older person to give them the quality of care. And to be able to discuss that because of the consequence to the worker, which we know is there from all of our research, which we know is there because workers are suffering burnout, because they go home every day knowing they weren't able to teach the way they wanted to, or whether it needed to be done, they weren't able to care the way in which all of their training has taught them. So for us to be able to challenge that, to say there needs to be a safe organisation of work, and a safe organisation of work within the public services means that there are enough workers at an adequate pay, with proper working schedules, reliable working environment with all of the support. That can be yet another tool to help us protect not only the worker, who's deserving, very much deserving of protection of their mental health in those circumstances, also their physical health, but also it's a way in which we can challenge the downgrading of public services. The second tool we're looking at, the second legal tool we're looking at, is public procurement rules. Now, public procurement rules all over Europe, trillions of euros, are decided to be spent on the lowest cost. A company turns up and says, I can provide that service at a cost lower than the current person who is doing it. And how are they doing that now? Because this has been going on for years. So the way in which it's happening now is very often on cutthroat terms and conditions, which are low pay and bad conditions of employment. Now, if you think back to what the ILO original public procurement convention said, it says you've got to take the pay conditions out of that equation. You should be competing because you actually can provide the service better, not because you can provide it cheaper. And I think if we manage to do that, to actually have the public procurement rules to ensure that the workers can join the union, that they have a collective agreement and the terms and conditions are the same as applied in the public sector, then the whole lot of the interest of of the companies, the corporations, who want to start commodifying, purely for the reason that they're going to make money either providing services to unemployed people, or one of the worst examples I can think of in Ireland is the waste management sector. So it's no longer even a case that it's thought about as a public service. It's been completely commodified. It's not the fact that you have a privatised provision of a public service. It's now the case that this is just being completely, the state has got out of the business of waste. The only role it sees for itself is regulating it. Whereas I think the Public Procurement Directive allows us to put on the table exactly the type of continuum that you're discussing here. Is it right that this service is even brought to public or to private tender? Is this an opportunity to begin to think about remunicipalising and bringing services back? And I see lots of encouraging examples of that from around Europe. And then finally, here's where I think we will be able to also have more research on the transnational protests. I'm hugely encouraged by what I see in terms of transnational collective action in response to Tesla. Because in Sweden, Tesla has decided that the green transition will be built on union busting seats. So the unions there are beginning to join up with unions in Denmark to have collective action by unions exactly. If you think about the great Irish example, and then to this, the wonderful example of the Dunnes Stores workers, who said we're not going to handle the oranges from South Africa. And that was a collective action by them. So similar collective action, and beginning to see, and I'm hugely encouraged, beginning to see in response to what's happened in Sweden with Tesla. So I think there's lots happening in this space. There's lots of different examples. Trade unions are very active. And I fully take on board the comments of the previous panel. Look, we're a movement that leads other movements. We're a movement of movements. And that's really the only way we're going to fight the far right. That's the only way we're going to win a fair, just society. And it's the only way we can move that continuum from commodification towards decommodification.